stuff. All right. So really quickly, a lot of things happening in a very short period of time, and just a sort of a quick update on where we are, and just talking about the offers, the global offer that came from Canada Post. And just expressing the thoughts and concerns that are some of what's going on behind that. So in expressing my opinions, it's really just speaking to my opinions. It's not speaking to representation of what the union's position is necessarily, or what the local's position is necessarily. But there's a lot of talk going on the work floor, and a lot of members are kind of frustrated and concerned about some of the offers and some of what the conversations are that are going on back and forth. And some of them are getting a little bit contentious. So I'm just going to express what my thoughts and concerns are with respect to the global offer that came from Canada Post. And I guess the first thing is at first blush, a lot of people were kind of like, I'm okay with it. I'm willing to take it, and we should put it to a vote. And I think this was part of the strategy that Canada Post employed from the very beginning. They wanted to take the workers out of what happened in that the strike that we went through in November and December, and they want to pivot off the frustrations and the anxiety that workers went through in that, and the length of time that we were left out of there. And just from my opinion, I think that the strike was being successful. And to my opinion, the proof of that was the fact that the government enacted the CIRB pause on the strike action. And in doing that pause on the strike action, they also tied it to a commission report to appoint William Kaplan to review the mandate of Canada Post. And the other part about it was to examine what was the intransigent position that the parties were not able to move from during negotiations. And that, to me, it was a hand-selected review. Kaplan was handpicked by the government to do that. And at the end of the day, when he issued his report and the recommendations that came out of that, he clearly did what Canada Post wanted. He gave them everything that they wanted coming out of that report. And further to that point, he solely pointed the finger of responsibility on the union as to the problem in bargaining. And he said that. It's on page 72 of his report. Bargaining largely failed because one party, CUPW, is defending business as usual and wants to improve on the status quo with, for example, further job security enhancements and even better than best-in-class total compensation in terms and conditions of employment. And, as I've said to many people, God forbid we're trying to improve on the working conditions of the working class. God forbid we're trying to improve on something that all workers will benefit from, as we have historically done in the right to strike in the federal sector and maternity leave rights, and the rights for RSMCs who did not have a legal right to collectively bargain at the time that we organized them and fought to get them that right. So God forbid we as a union should be trying to improve on working conditions that benefits everybody. But that's what William Kaplan comes out with his report. So then let's look at what we did as a union. When you first look at the package of demands, or the offer rather, that the corporation put out of their global offer, and you kind of step back then, you look at, well, what did we achieve out of our package of demands with respect to what the corporation is putting in the global offer? So if you look at the Perspective magazine that came out with their package of demands, the first thing that was a specific union demand, the number one union specific demand, was negotiate the end of CPC's separate sort and delivery project. And we didn't achieve that. Wage adjustments and allowances, attain a wage adjustment for all technical service employees to align compensation with fair market value. Didn't achieve that. The other urban one, develop and introduce an apprenticeship program within the VHE 9 classification. We got that. Eliminate blackout periods from vacation leave schedules. Didn't get that. So we didn't really achieve a lot of what we set out to do in collective bargaining. And instead, Canada Post was intransigent at the negotiations table through all that time, left workers out on the picket line all that time, and then puts this global offer on the table that, at the end of the day, this is not the final word on the subject. This is a discussion point. We asked for a 2-week extension to continue to digest this and negotiate further on what this offer was, and the corporation denied that. While we had presented a global offer on the Monday before, the week before, Canada Post walks away from the table. Then they put this package on the table and introduce it to the negotiators at the same time they're putting it out to the workers, clearly circumventing the negotiation process at the table and trying to negotiate directly through the workers, with a clear objective of trying to have the workers pressure their union to push for this, because Canada Post wanted to exhaust us. They wanted to beat us down. They wanted us to accept concessions, and they put things in this package of this global offer that are things that we already have in the collective agreement and try to present them as gains that we're making through the negotiation process. Because they've moved off of rollback positions, Canada Post tries to present those as part of their offer as gains that we're making. But in fact, we're not making gains. So, when we start to pick it apart at its core, it's not really achieving anything. We're not getting any financial gains with respect to getting back the buying power that we lost because of COVID and the buying power that we lost through inflation that came out of that. And that was one of the key things that we were looking to try and accomplish. We didn't achieve that. We didn't achieve a lot of the things that we wanted, and then when Canada Post turns around and digs in on things like flex delivery and dynamic routing, these are issues. Let's pick apart the dynamic routing component as an example. By their own admission, they want to do a soft launch because they don't really have the mechanisms by which they understand how to introduce this as a delivery model. But they're asking the union, they're asking the workers to accept what it amounts to a rollback on a delivery process that they haven't even understood how to introduce it yet. And as typical Canada Post fashion, it's just like, let's go ahead and plow ahead and we'll just let the workers figure out how to make it work. That doesn't work for us. Wanting to introduce a 15% increase in part-timers in the delivery model through their flex delivery process is an attack on sustaining meaningful jobs. It's creating a gig economy or gig workers by having a compelled extension of their hours. And at the same time, they want to take 15% of that work and give it to part-time. What full-timers are doing now, 15% increase of that work to part-time employees. So for the purposes of Canada Post taking off their wanting to get rid of the defined benefit pension or introduce a defined contribution pension, and even just for new hires, at the end of the day, you reduce the number of full-time employees contributing to the defined benefit pension. You are reducing the number of people that are contributing to the sustainability of that pension. So right now it's strong. Canada Post has taken pension contribution holidays, but at the end of the day, when you have now in future state less people contributing, one, that are full-time to that, you are attacking the sustainability of the defined benefit. And then the other part is the introduction of the part-time employees is about getting rid of full-time letter carrier positions, full-time Group 2 positions. So now you have less employees contributing to the defined benefit. So how are we going to sustain the benefit of our defined benefit pension when less people are contributing to it and 15% more of those people that are contributing to it are now part-time employees? Now you're attacking the pension plan, which furthers what is Canada Post's ultimate goal, is to ultimately get rid of the defined benefit and go to a defined contribution, which is a significant rollback. It's taking the steps that they want to take towards eroding what we can do, what we have, and the benefits that we have in the post office. This is a contract that, in my opinion, or an offer that we cannot take at its face. And for the workers that want to vote on this, you're voting away your future. And it'll be that argument in 5 or 10 years. People will go, why did the union agree to that? How do we have this garbage in the collective agreement? And it's because Canada Post wants to frustrate the workers. They want to beat us into each other. They want us attacking each other. They want to take away the resolve to fight. But that's not historically who we are. The fights that we have had in the years in the past and the fights that we've won have been hard-fought battles. Jean-Claude Perrault went to jail in the fights that we had. Those weren't easily won struggles, but we stood our ground. We fought a just, principled fight, standing on our feet, not crawling on our knees to accept garbage from an employer that wants to turn Canada Post into a commercial enterprise rather than a public service. We have to recognize that that's who we are. We are a public service. If they're going to argue declining letter mail volumes, don't argue that to me as a justification for the concessions and the rollbacks that you want. Well, then at the same time, telling us before when you threw that 2-year extension on us that you're going to invest billions of dollars into increased infrastructure. You're going to build the Albert Jackson plant in Scarborough. You're going to get green vehicles and then claim those as losses down the road and ask us to pay for that. Well, management continues to get bonuses, continues to pay themselves the profits off of our backs. Canada Post is not a losing enterprise. Canada Post is profitable, and workers, need to, all the members, get out of the mindset that it's a changing economy and it's a changing landscape. Canada Post is profitable. Canada Post is making money. The monies that they're making, or the monies that they're claiming are losses, aren't because of anything that the workers are doing and aren't because of just declining first-class letter mail volumes. It's management-conscious decisions that we have to reshape the mindset to get past the nonsense that they're claiming losses because of the changing landscape in the marketplace. That's not true. So, The reality then that we ultimately face is if we vote no to any of this, or if we go back out on strike, and if we get legislated back to work and potentially end up in in interest arbitration or worst case final selection arbitration, what's the landscape? We could end up with worse, and that's a possibility that could potentially happen. So what's our pivot point to challenge what Canada Post is trying to do and what the government is trying to do? And to me, the pivot point has always been the postal banking argument. Not what Canada Post is trying to do right now by, dipping their toe into financial services. We need a standalone brick and mortar postal banking service that is a banking service owned by all Canadians. Overnight, Canadians own the largest bank in the country, competing with the big banks, and they don't want us doing that. We can compete with them on service charges, interest rates, and in a standalone, self-sustained postal bank that will be providing loans and mortgages, things that we compete with the big banks on. And despite William Kaplan's report saying that postal banking won't work, and he gives a one-paragraph synopsis of why he doesn't think it's going to work, that's his opinion. There's huge studies. The study that was done in 2014, that was somewhere around 90 pages, absolutely sustains the argument that postal banking will work in Canada. And they looked at other banking institutions around other countries and demonstrated why postal banking will succeed in Canada. 54 of the largest banks in the world are postal banks. The bank in Switzerland, somewhere around 75% of their revenues are generated through their postal bank. And that's Switzerland, who is a huge banking mecca. So to think that banking won't work in Canada, William Kaplan didn't provide any substantiation. He gave the government and the corporations talking points on that are decades old. Of course it will work in here. Canadians aren't served by the big banks. We can do that. So in getting into postal banking, pivoting back to the argument about what happens in our fights going forward, we get the Canadian public to conjoin their interest to our interests. We demonstrate to them how postal banking will cross-subsidize through its profits healthcare, education, seniors, veterans, things that resonate with Canadians. Canadians buy into the argument that postal banking serves their interests. For us as postal workers, it protects our jobs, it increases our wages, creates good jobs, it broadens and improves our benefits, it sustains our pension, it takes the pension solvency argument off the table for Canada Post so they can't continue to throw that going forward as justification for rollbacks in future negotiations, and it serves the interests of what we're fighting for. It broadens. If we need to pivot and we need to broaden the services and think outside the box to improve what we do at Canada Post because there is a changing economic landscape, postal banking is the argument for that. So we get the public to sign on for that, and if privatization is part of the future agenda that Canada Post is looking at or the government is looking at, when Canadians own the largest bank in the country, and that's generating billions of profits into the coffers of the taxpayers, and it's offsetting the tax burden on them and subsidizing the interests that benefit Canadians, they're going to push back against their MPs in the government, and anybody else is going to try and privatize Canada Post. We make it so that their interests are conjoined with ours. They can't privatize Canada Post, and we are pushing banking, and we're creating good jobs, we're creating sustainable jobs, and we're benefiting postal workers, and we're benefiting the Canadian public. That's our pivot point to challenge what Canada Post is trying to continually push on the table in rollbacks through their justification for declining letter mail volumes and losses in the post office. Mismanagement is the reasons we're losing money, or if we are losing money, it's because of mismanagement decisions and because of infrastructure investment. Postal banking takes all those arguments off the table. We need to get a concerted campaign effort, coordinated to push postal banking hardcore, get the public on board. Just as we got the public on board to stop the elimination of door-to-door, we get the public on board on the postal banking argument. We push it for politicians that they can't take it off the table. We get that put in, and it doesn't require an act of the government. It's already on the books for the Canada Post Act. We can already get into postal banking. So we get into postal banking, and we take this nonsense and this garbage off the table. That's our pivot point. That's the fight that we continue going forward. So it's not going to be an overnight. It's not going to be a quick success story, but it's a fight that's sustainable. It's a focused agenda. It's a focused argument that we bring forward. And if we push that, we have the justification to continue to say no to rollbacks. We drew our line in the sand. We fought hard. Whether we should have defied legislation in December, I think we should have. I think that's something we should have tested the waters on. I was in favor. Personally, I would have done that. But whether or not that ultimately was something we should have done, we didn't do it. But we drew our line in the sand. We have been strong at the negotiations table that we will not and are not willing to accept concessions. We need to stop the hemorrhaging. We need to stop the concession bargaining, and we need to start getting the gains that we have earned as postal workers, because we've made Canada Post the success story that it is, and Canada Post is successful because of our efforts and not in spite of our efforts, that's where we need to go. So stay strong, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and always remember that the struggle continues.